It's a theological world. After all, after all, after all, after all.
In a world where we scroll endlessly, binge watch, and consume more images in a week than our grandparents saw in a lifetime, why do beauty, art, and imagination still stop us in our tracks? In this episode, we explore with philosopher Charles Taliaferro why imagination is not a luxury, it's a window into reality itself. We'll trace the conversation from current fascination with consciousness, think neuroscience, AI, and the hard problem of consciousness that just won't go away, it won't leave us, into how our deep human experiences of beauty and creativity might actually serve as evidence for God. We'll unpack how natural theology can meet in the galleries of art and the screens of cinema, while revealed theology takes the spark and turns it into a flame. Along the way, we'll consider why, in a tech-saturated, materialist age, theology might just be the most surprising and necessary voice in the room. This episode blends the timeliness of consciousness debates, the universality of beauty and art, and the depth of theology's engagement with both. It invites listeners into a kind of conversation they rarely hear, philosophy that's not afraid of pop culture, theology that's not afraid of science, and imagination that refuses to be sidelined. Welcome back to It's a Theological World After All, the show where we explore how theology isn't just for the church basements or seminary classrooms. It's actually woven into the very fabric of our lives. Today, we're going to talk about something you probably don't think about when you're standing in front of a painting, watching your favorite movie, or hearing a piece of music that stops you in your tracks. That feeling, that mix of wonder, longing, and maybe even transcendence might be telling you something about reality itself. And in an age obsessed with AI, neuroscience, and the big debates about consciousness, we're going to connect the dots, or try to. What if imagination isn't just pretend? What if beauty is actually a clue, a pointer that leads us somewhere beyond the material, toward the God who made us? My guest today is philosopher and theologian Charles Taliaferro, who's a professor at St. Olaf College, and who, if you're familiar with the area of philosophy, you've heard of his name. He's written on consciousness, the mind-body problem, imagination itself, and a whole host of other issues in philosophy of religion. He's one of the most engaging thinkers in the philosophy of mind, the soul, the role of beauty and imagination in theology. We'll explore where the conversation of consciousness stands today, how it connects to natural theology, and why revealed theology makes all of this not just fascinating, but deeply personal. So whether you're a skeptic, a seeker, or just someone who loves a good story, lean in. This conversation might just change the way you see the world. Good to be with you, Charles. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for welcoming me, indeed.
Yeah, good to have you. Well, everyone's already talking about AI. We hear about it all the time on social media, about chatbot, what it can and can't do, what it might be able to do, what it might be able to do in the future. We hear about the problems of AI. Maybe it's going to lead to a dystopian world. Of course, these kinds of questions and discussions are becoming par for the course. They're pretty normative now. They're pretty standard. Or maybe they'll make our lives a lot better. In some ways, of course, they have. In other ways, we'll see. There's a lot of speculation out there around it. Of course, this is tightly related in many ways to consciousness itself, what it means to be conscious. Neuroscience is often claiming that the soul is outdated, although there has been some recent discussions that have opened up the discussions afresh, I think. Certainly the hard problem of consciousness, this idea that we experience the world, what philosophers call qualia or something of the sort, this idea that we can't seem to quite reconcile experience with brain bits or neurons firing or whatever, what have you. It still haunts the scientist and even the neuroscientist. So with this, we can think about a series of movies like The Matrix, Inside Out, that are raising questions about the nature of consciousness, animality, and even technology itself. So, Charles, everyone's talking about AI, neuroscience, and consciousness these days. What do you see as the biggest misconceptions we've bought into?
Well, it's quite a setup. No, very impressive. I certainly love the way you've set the table for your viewers and for me as well. I think that what AI plays into is what is known as functionalism. This is an approach to the mind, the mental. It goes back to just after World War II, when there was a real turn towards behaviorism. There were various people involved. I'm going back to, in a way, the founder of behaviorism in the modern era, which was, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Not B.F. Skinner, but it was Weston. Wilson. Wilson, that's right. He actually was in. He was very happy at first with the word psychology to describe what he was doing, but psychology comes from the Greek psyche, meaning soul, and logos, meaning knowledge. And what disturbed him is that the study of psychology in the 30s, 40s was taking introspection very seriously and subjective experience. And he goes, no. He wanted to change it to being the logic or the study of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, he actually left the area of philosophy of mind or psychology and so on and went into advertising, which is quite interesting. At the end of his life, which is all about trying to predict and trying to manipulate people to buy Toyotas or whatever. In any case, what AI does is minimally, everybody agrees, it simulates what it would be to be an agent or agentive, to be somebody, a purposive, in this case now, mechanism, but to undertake mechanical procedures, not just reading texts. And I've used AI on articles and on books, novels, even, and you can actually instruct these mechanisms in a way to, let's say, if you're doing The Great Gatsby, you could say, write me a paper in which Daisy turns out to be the hero and leaves her husband and marries Gatsby, and it'll do it. And it's broken down books I've written into dialogues between male and female voices. So in a functional way, this new family of devices is very impressive in terms of simulating what an actual living, breathing, conscious agent could do. It might even take much longer to do. So for myself, who was born right in 52, but came of age 60s, 70s, 80s in the world of philosophy, both in North America as well as in England. And when I was young, the quasi-behaviorism was in the air. Some of the great heroes would be Gilbert Ryle, but also Vic Wittgenstein, Austrian-born, but flourished at Cambridge University in England. And he is so disparaged, as well as Stuart Hampshire, a number of other minor players, the notion that we have a subjective, private experience, and that all we really need to be concerned with is language and behavior. Mm-hmm. And if that's our concern, if that's the whole thing, AI is posing, quite a problem, because it seems agentive. Why not recognize eventually that you'd have an artificial person? Now, for those of us that think that the quasi-behaviorism of Ryle and Wittgenstein are inadequate to the datum of experience of what it's like to be Joshua, me, any of our viewers, it's like, to use an old term, it's like artificial butter. Artificial butter is not butter; it's artificial.
Yes,
And
that's right. I totally agree with that. Yes, yes.
So it really flies in the face of subjectivity and consciousness, and it probably only occurs to the AI community when you come across ethical matters. I mean, could we create an AI bent on self-destruction? Think of 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, where Hal takes over the space vessel, kills various astronauts, and so on. But even unplugging AI, they think, well, if we're going to treat this as a person, have we just killed a person? And I would say our current intuitions, even 2025, are heavily pitted against that. And the reason why is because we don't really deep down buy the whole thing that a computer feels pain, it can suffer, it can live. It's not alive biologically. And even if you built it out of organic matter, it still would be a, quote, live question about whether you actually have conscious subjective experience.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's right. That's fascinating. I think Charles, you probably heard about Sean Carroll's discussion. It's probably been maybe it's been 2 years already now, or a year and a half or so. He was having and he talked about this in writing as well as on his podcast when he was talking with the neuroscientist Ralph Milnor or something. I can't remember the last name, but he was describing how he had a conversation with his chatbot. I think he was 3.0 at the time. Now we're at 5.0, and he was having this argument with it and saying, "Yeah, I think you're conscious." He was telling the chatbot this. He was typing it in, and chatbot kept telling him, "No, I'm not conscious. I'm not even an I," or something like that. And so I think he was being somewhat humorous, although Sean Carroll may very well believe that chatbots will be conscious at some point. Why not, right? And so I was reading, I think this kind of fits with what you're saying. I just finished up what I thought was a fantastic read. It's more of a history of philosophy, kind of intellectual history by Justin E.H. Smith. The internet is not what you think it is, and he kind of argues along the lines that you're talking. You're describing AI in terms of. He says internet and AI both are both kind of representations of the mind of man or humans, and this is something that really, at one level, we've been doing for most of the history of philosophy. We don't realize it because we think, well, the internet and AI is really a lot more exotic than basket weaving or something like that, or knitting or something like that. But he says, really, at some really low level, the internet and AI are basically reflections of these low-level kind of technologies that we've had in early civilization, and they're just ways of representing the mind, or kind of giving, kind of trading out some of those more those basic operations of the mind, so that we can do what Leibniz calls and meditate more. So that's what the intention of it is, or something. And so Smith traces that out in various ways, and he kind of ends on that note. The ending was a little kind of boring and ho-hum, but the rest of the book was great. Just kind of tracing out how it is that the internet reflects what humanity's always been doing. And I thought that was an interesting take. I thought at first when I started reading him, I thought it was gonna lead in a much more a kind of dystopian direction and the like. But Yeah, I mean, I think AI is an attempt to kind of represent the mind so that we can do simpler tasks more easily, and I think that's certainly part of it. But again, it's a representation. It's not an actual mind, right? And it's not a living mind, like you say. So anyway, I'm thrilled that you're here. You've written a lot on the philosophy of mind at the intersection of the soul, beauty, and imagination. In fact, you've kind of stimulated and shaped and formed a lot of my thinking over the years, particularly at the intersection of like how it is that this soul has become and is so important to thinking about other aspects of life, like beauty and imagination. There's not a lot of people, particularly contemporary analytic philosophers today, who are thinking along those lines, or doing that kind of work of reviving the importance of the soul and its importance for these other issues. So I want to ask a kind of slightly different question, and then we'll come around and try to bring all this together somehow, some way. What was the last time you What was the last time you encountered a piece of art, music, or even a story that stopped you in your tracks?
Well, that is a great question. Allow me, though, and I realize I'm the guest, not the host, just to briefly comment on what you
No,
said.
please
Give
do.
me a moment to prepare an answer to you. I agree with you entirely that you can go back to the first writing that we have is something like just 7,000 BCE, and or the medieval period of where somebody's working on vellum, which is cowhide in terms of etching in, paper coming to Europe from China. Eventually, things get more sophisticated, but I believe there's a difference between a chariot and a cart. There's a difference between working on vellum and working on my computer. But to an extent, some of this involves just things in space-time, mass and energy, mechanical explanations for easing and expanding the power that the human mind has, that we have, to represent the world to ourselves and also to represent other worlds and the like. I'm reminded of, of Leibniz's idea that if you went into a mill, you see all the sophisticated work, but you go in there, are you going to ever see subjective conscious experience? And he says, no. And I think the same thing is true if you go into these devices, you're not going to find that which makes us human or a soul. So on the soul, and then on directly to your question, but I'll say something about how I think the soul has come back, and then over to your actual question.
Sure. No, take your time. Yeah, go.
Okay. The word soul, I believe, has had a comeback in two areas. One is the area of the ordinary language use of the word soul, where you might say somebody, this is a soulless job, or he's lost his soul, or this is a soulful experience. So this involves, I think, personal integrity over time. Are you being true to your values? Are you self-consistent? If I were to lie to you, I and again split myself up into two people. So the notion of a soul is, and for the Greeks, it would be the principle of life. And Aristotle had a slightly different view than Plato, and today, a lot of even atheists and neuroscientists like Oliver Sacks, and at the end of his life, he is starting to use the word soul more and more. Even in The Man Who Mistook His Wife for His Hat, he was asked the question in one of the essays about whether one of his patients still has a soul. He has tremendous amnesia, tremendous neurological disorders, and Sacks himself feels compelled to use the word soul to describe this person as still underneath all these persona. There's still, so I think, and then also I believe that even some hardcore materialists like Paul Churchland, who's aging now, but Paul and Patricia Churchland were very big on as eliminativists, eliminating, love, desire, beliefs, and so on. They don't really exist except in folk psychology. But even one of Paul's books, Paul Churchland, is called The Engine of the Soul. So even people like Oliver Sacks, Paul Churchland, both atheists, they're still trying to get at the notion of we philosophers, we want to do justice to the ordinary felt experience of what it is to have and to be an integrated person and what it is to be a person. Mm-hmm. Now, beauty and art and how it comes together. I am a stickler for being in the presence of art, and in particular, I suppose the visual arts have been poetry, music is important to me, very, very important. But wherever I have lived, when it was Boston, I was at the University of Notre Dame for a year. I've been in Minneapolis. My college is just south of Minneapolis. I've chosen one or two paintings. So in Cambridge, it was Max Beckmann's self-portrait. And it was a portrait of St. Ives, a statue of St. Ives, that I would see at least twice a week. And this would be over the course of sometimes, I was in Boston for 6 years. And Notre Dame, it was a Chagall. In Minneapolis, where I live now, it's Rembrandt's wonderful painting of a terrifying scene of Lucretia. This beautiful woman, she's been raped, and she's ringing a bell, notifying her husband that she's been violated by a tyrant. And actually, in Roman history or mythology, this is a very, very important moment. And it's extremely beautiful. Her eyes are filled with sorrow, there are tears, the drapery of her sleeve ringing the bell is almost on the level of an abstract painting, beautifully done. And what I have found over the years is sometimes going back to the same painting or statue in the case of St. Ives. I develop a kind of history with the painting. I'm not this odd, but I'm almost would ask of the Max Beckmann portrait, I say, how are you today, Max? I would almost treat the object as something alive. And I think Max Beckmann was a fascinating person. It's a self-portrait. He's very arrogant in the portrait. He's a scar tuxedo. And over the years, I gradually came to see a real fragility and a fear in him. He was painting during the time of World War II. So it's been interesting. I urge people whether it's with literature, Lord of the Rings, a favorite of mine, must have read it 20 times, the Lucretia, a painting or poem that resonates with you, that you can have a relationship with it that changes over time. And I believe it can speak to your soul, that is your integrity over time, and can also hint at a kind of larger world than just your own, your daydreams.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. So these experiences of art, music, and story. I remember one of my friends who was describing his experience with Daniel Dennett, and may rest in peace. And sure he, met the Lord and changed his opinion, but he was giving a talk on defending his eliminativism, and he was describing, he had this big picture of beer, German beer, because this was a German university, and Germans love beer. So, and he was describing the experience, and he, at the end of the day, he said, it's good, but it's at the end of the day, it's just it's chemicals and then neurons firing as a result, and the experience and the Germans kind of looked at him like a lot of them were like, you don't really believe that, do you? There's a lot more to the experience of beer than the neurons firing at the end of the day. There's something. There's a quality there that is not expressed in neurons firing. So anyway, I thought that was a funny way of pointing to this portrait. Not only that there are experiences in the world, but these experiences point to a subject of those experiences, the soul itself. It seems something that has them, something that itself is inexplicable, like the experiences, inexplicable in terms of physical mechanisms and triggers and neurons firing and the like, and art really, as you described, really kind of really illustrates that and brings it alive, the fact of the soul. So there's an intimacy between soul and art and beauty and imagination, and I think that's important. Yeah. So coming around to the consciousness, and you can touch on everything that I've just talked about, and that's great. I want to ask about consciousness in this context. We've said there's been a lot that's been discussed by AI and AI engineers, and recently about whether or not things can become aware. I mean, one of the most interesting books I read about 2 years ago describes some of these issues from the context of, I mean, she mixes literature, her personal experience, where she's deconverting from her evangelical and kind of more fundamentalist background, which she describes very positively, and she's moving in the direction of some kind of techno-humorism, techno-futurism that she sees as potentially, maybe, even though the world seems disenchanted, as she left behind her evangelical faith and went in this direction, maybe technology can move us in a more optimistic and hopeful direction. And so this was one of the more interesting books I read 2 years ago, Megan O'Geeblin's book, God, Human, Animal, and Machine. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You've probably read it. I've just found her fascinating to read, but she kind of moves in that direction. But there's exemplified by her and by a whole host of other things that are going on right now, not just those who are philosophers, but a lot of people are becoming, it seems, more interested in consciousness. And it seems like there's a lot more talk around it, a lot more buzz, a lot more kind of confrontation, maybe with reality a little bit more. And consciousness, whether we're talking about computer science engineering or we're talking about social media and the sociological results of interacting with social media, or whether we're talking about pop psychology on Psychology Today, we're talking a lot about consciousness. And that seems to be at the heart of these discussions. Where do you think we're at right now with consciousness? What are your thoughts on that generally? Where are we at? Where's the culture at right now?
Okay, great question. And I think you've given me permission to move back just a hair.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I'll start with what you've just asked, and then I'll just fill it in a little bit. In 1994, my first book was published with the word consciousness in it. It was called Consciousness and the Mind of God. And a lot of my colleagues, two of whom were Wittgensteinians, said, don't put the word consciousness in the title. No, please don't. But now consciousness is the word. There's consciousness studies now.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is the key. In English, the likely coiner of the word consciousness is Ralph Cudworth in the 1600s. He also coined the word theism, the word philosophy of religion. A lot of the early uses of terms that we use today in philosophy, including naturalism and materialism were coined in the 1600s. This is where a lot of philosophy in Europe and to some extent in the United States, but the United States pretty early on was English, was done in Greek for a long time, and then Latin was the main international language. So when we started doing philosophy in English, consciousness was there at the beginning. And I think it's come to the fore partly because of what people like Daniel Dennett were leaving out. So Dennett, who up to his very end, he was very adamant that he himself didn't exist. He was a fictional entity, a narrative center of gravity. And he said to one interviewer not long before he died, there's no polite way to say to somebody that they don't exist. So he kind of was, he realized that his view was slightly rude in the sense that it comes up against not just everyday experience, but the experience of somebody dying or witnessing a birth and so on. There's a wonder to this, or in the art world. And I do think it's a spiritual matter. I gave a talk at Middlebury right after Daniel Dennett did. And I was told by my host that Dennett said that you can never be free until you've killed God, which is interesting. Yes. I think he felt like, if you get consciousness in there, well, look out, God might be in the arena. And so he was very aware that you needed to, the book I'm reading now, an Oxford University Press book, talks about vaporizing God. You have to vaporize God if you're going to be able to, if you're going to be an atheist, you've got to hold the line on certain levels. So now over to the recent book in technology. It's not surprising that people would look to technology, that could be our savior. And in a way, there are radical things that could happen that could even possibly, conceivably reverse climate change. I mean, they've talked about all kinds of models that we could do, very dangerous and unpredictable results. But it might be that we could halt what seems like a global crisis in the making within our lifetimes or within the next 50 years. So it's no wonder that technology is also, along with consciousness, the word of the hour. But what people don't fully appreciate is that technology is always, techne in the Greek is a means, a kind of purpose of activity that persons operate. Now we may be talking about technology being self-aware and it being the artist, but a work of art, and by a photograph, a fine photography, somebody might say, look at that art. Now, an ancient person wouldn't know what you were talking about, but they would know if you said that's a work of art. A work of art is done by somebody who uses techne, or the Latin word for techne is ars, from which we get art. So art actually, from the word, from either the Latin or the Greek, comes from the way something is produced. And it's an artifact, that is, it's a creation of a person or a purposive, intelligent, conscious, subjective being. So that doesn't have a mind of its own. It's produced by a mind. And we now just drop the words work of art. We say that's art. Yeah. But really what we mean is that's a work of art. So I think technology has, of course, been the reason why modern science has received its enormous prestige. It gets a lot of prestige just in expanding our knowledge that the Earth is not the center of our immediate planetary system. The sun is, that we get the idea of the solar system, but it was really technology in terms of level of life, in terms of medicine, in terms of military power, exploitation, and control. This is all the fruit of technology.
Yes.
If we die in a thermonuclear heat death due to atomic weapons, we will die because of our technology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it is obviously a powerful, and it should be an arresting topic that requires our best thinking about what it is capable of doing, and what are the moral implications of this.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So it technology, you're saying, is we're at a point in history that it's confronting us with our own selves and consciousness, but it's also we're at a point in history where technology is demonstrating aspects of our own humanity, our own creatureliness, our own weaknesses, our own limitations. Technology is doing, having in some real substantive sense, it's confronting us with those limitations. So technology, that's part of the dialogue right now, and if I'm hearing you correctly, and so it's leading us in this dialogue to maybe in important and helpful ways to reconfigure or reconfront the reality of our own situation and humanity, forcing us to ask hard questions. And it's uncomfortable also. It's pretty uncomfortable. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't see. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
What I would just amplify this is that it's expansive, and then it also it's contracting as well. That is the optimism for somebody who was, let's say, born deaf or born blind. The idea now that we might have prosthetic organs, that somebody, the big difference between somebody who is born with sight and then who loses it versus somebody who is born blind. So we're on the path to being able to recover, or to help somebody to have an audio world, to recover sound.
Yeah.
All these are, in the general sense, good. It strikes me that there are many aspects, and obviously, many of us who have relatives who are disabled, cerebral palsy. My great niece has it. I really applaud all the technology that has gone into trying to give her ways to communicate, to move by herself. Right now, she needs 100% adult care. She's 6 years old. Would that develop the means to allow her to restore her God-given abilities as a human being? But I think where it's literally contracting is coming up with faster, quicker, and more effective ways to kill us. Our new Secretary of Defense, he said, our military is about lethality. And he goes, lethality. And I don't think that is actually the function of the military. I think that we should think of our military as, in the context of justice and principally of defense rather than exploitation and control. So there are times when killing may be necessary in a justified war, or say of defense, but really technology is increasing our ability to, when we face enemies, to undermine them, whether it's in business, whether it's in sport. The game of tennis was getting out of hand because of the new technology. I'm just using a trivial everyday example.
Yeah.
Wimbledon actually had to change the grass to slow down the technological advancing of these athletes who are producing, almost automatic aces. And so they had to actually, that was boring. And so
Yeah.
we had to contract this ability. I mean, you can make, whether golf clubs or any number of things, any number of sorts, where the game becomes so crazy that actually we've had to put limits on doping when you're bicycling. You know, all this is science.
Yeah.
We have the golf clubs, tennis clubs, and we have the airplanes that can be launched from the United States, get refueled, and take out nuclear reactors. So we should just be aware of the magnitude of danger that's involved. And we need a good philosophy, a good ethics. We need a good theology as we think these things through. Unguided, we're like an unguided missile. Who knows what we'll hit?
That's right. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. You've described a lot of positive aspects of technology and of course, some of the dangers. Moving this into the realm of this discussion into the realm of art, creativity, beauty, and imagination, you've thought a lot about. There's certainly one, and maybe there's areas of optimism here as well, but there's certainly one area, I think, where there's a lot of pessimism surrounding the development of technology and the development of technology through the internet itself. One of those areas is in the area of entertainment. Entertainment's great. We have a lot of it now. There's certainly a concern about, the stimulation of an absolute kind of Epicureanism or hedonism today that seems to be prominent in American culture. Many would argue, certainly in classical education, I've been a supporter of the classical movement over the years recently, and there's certainly a critique from that side in terms of the overutilization of technology, especially entertainment as the medium of education. Or the screen of education, going back to Neil Postman's really important book, Using Ourselves to Death. And even in recent history in the 2000s, there was this this indulgence in kind of low grade, low content, low production entertainment in America through talk shows, through reality TV, which has reduced entertainment to what some would say is more base. Now we see much more on TV that generations we would have rejected. But my daughter, she watches some TV, but we've cut back significantly recently. She watches a lot of those YouTube shows. There's these YouTube shows that kids are getting into, where these kids are just playing with these packages that they get from the mail, and they show everything from opening it up and playing with these little figurines and things, and the kids love it. But it seems to sort of cultivate this sort of low production, low content fixation. I guess the question that's been kind of itching at me for a while is, some would say that a lot of art is just entertainment. It's reducible to entertainment. It's reducible to those sort of pleasurable sensations. But maybe is there something deeper going on? And is there something deeper going on that we need to pay attention to that points us back to the soul again?
Well, I think so. I'm a fan of, I will say, of popular culture, and I've written on everything from the Rolling Stones to Harry Potter and the like. But to try to say something original and not to repeat what you've said, I think that one of the greatest gifts we have is time, the time that we're given. And one of the downsides of technology, well, the both sides of technology. One is it allows you to use time more efficiently, and everything increasingly is measured in terms of time. Even where I live, they still give mileage, but it's often measured in time. It says it's right now 5 minutes from this freeway. So even there, space is kind of subverted to just how much time is it going to take you to get to that place. But I think that the time that you give, for example, in a relationship, whether it's a professor-student relationship, it's romantic, it's family, it's between friends, one of the greatest gifts you can give to another person is your time. You'll never get it back again.
Yeah.
Those of you that are viewing this, I take seriously the 11th commandment, thou shalt not be boring.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I don't want to waste a moment of your time. And that's the way I am in the classroom. Try to make every moment counts, but don't hurry things. I was putting down Wittgenstein, but I'll say something in his favor. He once told another philosopher, kind of said, take your time when you do philosophy. Take time. You can't rush this. And so I think what I would contrast the cinema with is the museum. And the museum, which actually, comes from the word, the seat of the muses.
Mm-hmm.
The museums that are very important in most capitals in most of the world are actually supported by the government. So for us, it'd be the National Museum. In Britain, it would be the National Museum right off Trafalgar Square.
Yeah.
Now, there, the only cost of admission for you, as whether a tourist or a Londoner or a Brit, is just that you're interested. It's a voluntary thing, but that's the cost of admission, unlike a movie theater, which is now can be $18 to $25. So just if you're interested, and museums give you a public space, which unlike the airlines, doesn't have a first class economy comfort and then coach. You can get as close as the museum guard will let you to the painting. It's not because if you're an extra donor, I'm sure they had a special donors party. But really, most of these museums, it's funny, you get kind of stared at when you look too long. The number of times I've been to museums and I stand before a painting and they say, sir, can I help you? I'm just enjoying this painting. Okay. I've been there like 20 minutes and other people will spend 3 minutes. They'll do a selfie in front of it.
Yeah.
Something like that. And so I think one of the resources for the future will be museums as a place to go in public where you run into people. You can't be just in your own closet or bedroom and just flipping around, unpacking these things. Rather, it's a public space. You interact. Most museums around the world, including tough societies like Russia, which I've been to, the museums in Moscow, but they also encourage, seminars and lectures, people actually listening to each other. So
that's quite something. Yes.
I'm really in favor of museums, even when they contain, and especially when they contain sacred objects like icons, crosses, matters of Christian significance. I've actually used the museum sites as a place for prayer, meditation. And you can do so in a way that's undisclosed or it's not overtly public, hyperbolic, or strange. When I saw Rublev's The Trinity in Moscow, beautiful painting of the Trinity, and I wasn't going to kiss it, though I might have if I could have. But I did. I put my backpack down, and I pretended like I was just tying my shoe, but actually I was kneeling in front of the icon, actually as an act of prayer or worship or oblation, self-offering for an image of the God I worship. So museums are still in business, and I think the more than the better.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. So Yeah, so entertainment for you has something, there's something richer and deeper going on with entertainment that points us to something that is even artistic, that's or a work of art, a techne of art. There's something about the artistry of painting, of music and film itself that is more substantive, transcendent. Um,
Well,
so
take the word
yeah,
entertaining. The word entertaining, I believe, is commonly used to mean pleasurable, enjoyable, enchanting, captivating. But
yeah,
really, entertaining also signifies entertaining a thought, that is,
mm,
as it were, contemplating an
yes,
idea. And for those of us in education, um, many of us try to make our work entertaining. You have done that, Joshua. Your
yeah,
books are excellent. They include humor. Even the title of your most recent work, "It's a Theological World After All."
yeah,
I couldn't help but smile when I saw that. I thought that is right on. And I think with our students, professors have to ask them to entertain sometimes very, very difficult questions. For example, one of my classes in philosophy of art, we took up the issue that a lot of the photographs we have of the people being taken to the concentration camps to their death were actually Nazi photographers. So
mm,
we're actually
well,
looking through the lens as we see um, these people who will be gassed to death.
yeah,
Now we're seeing them through the eyes of compassion and sorrow and regret, grievous sense of we must never forget this. But we had to take up the issue in my class of, well, are we in a way, by looking through the eyes of the victimizers, are we in a way participating in this in some
mm,
ugly way? Not, of course, when these camps were liberated and Allied photographers photographed these famished and highly damaged poor persons, and of course survivors have also treasured the records that we have of the liberation of these camps and so on.
yeah,
But I'd say, in general, as an educator, you, Joshua, have to present at times very difficult things to confront. And the same is true as in Christianity, the reality of sin and vice, the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation, which is not always easy. It's not always beautiful.
right,
It's sometimes with lots of tears
yes,
and very, very hard. So in my class on philosophy of religion, one of my students' uncle was killed very violently by a medical worker who was clearly insane, and um, he was arrested. He was in jail. He became a Christian in jail, and then asked the family to meet with her and the survivors to forgive him. He was going to beg them for forgiveness,
mm,
and they said, uh, "We will." That we will forgive you in the sense that we won't resent you in the future. We will pray for you, but we cannot actually meet with you because that would re-traumatize us. This would re-trigger the horror of that
mm,
event.
yes,
So that kind of discussion about, well,
yeah,
what is forgiveness? Was that forgiveness tarnished?
yeah,
If they were really behind it, you've got, you're the person who has injured you is asking you to meet in person.
yeah,
What is the limit of your conscience? And all of those matters involve beauty and ugliness. The repentance of the person was beautiful. The
yeah,
fact that the person came to realize, and this was probably a horrible experience, the ugliness and the profound lifelong sorrow he's caused this family,
yeah,
mired in this ugliness. He's looking for a way out. And it's a living question for Christians to consider what it means to actually, there's reconciling forgiveness where you embrace the person, but then there can also be a forgiveness which is up to the very limits of what is humanly possible for you to do, given the injury that you've had inflicted.
Right. Yeah. And all of that requires some level of imagination.
Some level of wisdom and imagination.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's probably, there's a lot more there's a lot you said there. There's a lot we could explore there or entertain. Let me, maybe we'll come back to that. Let me ask a question about, a different question related to that. If imagination isn't just pretend, as we've been saying, imagination isn't just pretend. It's not entertainment in the kind of crude sense that we were talking about. And beauty itself isn't just an evolutionary decoration, you might say. And maybe there's something to the theological dimension of imagination. So I want to connect to your thoughts here about, you've done a lot of work on imagination, pointing to the soul, and as a way of doing natural theology. Natural theology. We talk about ways creation points to the Creator. Could imagination, or does imagination and beauty point in that way to a Creator?
Well, I would say, to be sort of crafty, yes, it can. First, on what is imagination, the old definition was that it has to involve an actual image. So that has expanded over the centuries. So imagination can be an image. It can involve picturing or conceiving or contemplating something that is not immediately visible or apparent to you in terms of your senses. So, for example, tube of toothpaste, you can't see the back of it, but you know it has a back. In a way, in a banal, everyday sense, imagination is used all the time. Kant believed that imagination was a primary faculty with respect to all our senses that involves, we don't live in an instant. We have to picture what came past, and we anticipate what becomes future, and we have to picture things around us that we don't immediately sense. I put a coffee pot on. I can't see it. I've got to, what am I doing? I'm exercising my imagination by picturing it. Now, imagination here is very different from pretending or make-believe. These are typically involved in games. Not always. They can have a role in therapy. Art therapy will be diagnostic or therapeutic. It can be diagnostic if you ask a child to draw a picture of themselves. And if they don't draw their feet or they don't draw their hands, this tells a therapist something. So imagination can tell a therapist something about you that you may not even realize, whether you put buttons on the shirt or in an environment or just in space. But people have distinguished between creativity and fantasy. Now, I would want to defend fantasy, Narnia, Lord of the Rings, et cetera, et cetera. These are fairy tales. But fantasy can also be used as a corrupt form of imagination, such as self-pleasure or fulfilling narcissistic dreams. Oh, I just won a gold medal in my daydream. This is kind of almost self-pleasure and pointless in a way. but imagination proper can be both the means towards or the means against God. Imagining God doesn't exist and feeling a remoteness from God, not feeling God's presence, can sometimes actually bring you closer to God because you're being realistic. Secondly, sometimes feeling the absence of something gives a slight clue of its reality. There used to be an argument brought by John Henry Newman in the 19th century, called the factory girls argument. And he pictured a factory girl who says, there's got to be someplace better than this. Yeah. And the way he develops that narrative, she gradually comes to long for something better. There's a scene in Narnia where Puddleglum imagines, he's in a cave, he imagines what Narnia, real Narnia would be like. And these can be ways where imagination can circuitously bring one into the Lord's arena. But there are two other positive things that can be said. One is that it requires imagination reading scripture. There's a great practice, going back to Loyola, Ignatius of Loyola, St. Teresa, of picturing the scenes of the gospel, the Old Testament, and so on. Yeah. And then there's also the other bigger question of what do we do in a world full of laws of order, of natural law, and also creatures with consciousness, but not just consciousness, but creatures that are capable of imagination, religious experience, moral experience, the experience of beauty. That, in my view, is far more likely if there is a God of supreme goodness who, from God's very being as the triune creator of us all, emanates or creates a cosmos reflecting glory and beauty in which pain and suffering exists, but often it's in cases of where something good is being harmed or injured. So below the evil, the evident injury you see, and let's say my arm is injured, you see, this shouldn't occur because it would be better or good if I had motility and mobility in both my hands.
Yeah.
So imagination can function on these different levels.
Yes.
Or so I suggest.
Sure. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. You talk a lot about that in two books that were really informative for me years ago. Two books that you actually wrote with Jill Evans.
Jill.
Yes. Right. Yeah. There were two books. Yeah. The Turn. Let's see. The Turn.
The Image in Mind, or returning images, and also I did. We wrote "Is God Invisible?" And we just finished a book for Cambridge University Press, a Cambridge Element book called "On Iris Murdoch and the Transcendent." She was an atheist for whom beauty and art was extremely important. Yeah. And we call it Iris Murdoch on the Transcendent. She was born 1920s. She died in 1999. Eminent novelist. She wrote 26 novels. She was a professor at Oxford, graduate of the university there. And she defended the reality of consciousness when it was not popular. She defended the reality of values when that was not popular. Lots of people thought, values, this is just people's preferences. And she goes, no, these are real. There's real beauty and there's real good art and bad art. She had quite a lively discussion there, but she said, that's as far as I'm going. For us, we are just simply here. She had a love of Christianity because of its emphasis on forgiveness and redemption. love. She believed in the good as an abstract principle. But she said, God, if there is a God, loves you. The good doesn't love you. So she was really torn at the end. And we, in our book, forthcoming, argue that she doesn't convincingly foreclose the natural tendency, if you believe in consciousness, fact and values, art and beauty. This begs, or that is, invites the question of the transcendent. And so we end the book with suggesting that she hasn't really forsaken or fully renounced this. Her famous phrase is, "We are simply here." And we say, that's hard to take, that we're simply here, in light of the fact of how wondrous and extraordinary life is, with the creativity, art, beauty, freedom. She was not a determinist. And it certainly invites taking theism seriously as one possibility versus some form of naturalism. It would have to be, she describes herself as a non-dogmatic, open-ended naturalist. And we suggest, well, at a certain point, your naturalism gets so bloated, so big. Theism really offers an account of this. And you haven't given us a reason to not realize that it could be a theological world after all.
That's right. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yeah. Do you? Yeah. Do you think naturalism? To what extent do you think naturalism is still kind of present in our social conversations related to this recent book that you're talking about? And what's the allure to naturalism? Why has it captivated our imaginations?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's still in vogue, certainly, though some philosophers seek to bracket the big metaphysical questions. They believe they can do philosophy of mind, political philosophy, epistemology, all these logic, the philosophy of science, all these dimensions, and keep their eye off of what's it all about, that kind of big question. And partly it's because of there's some perhaps despair. There's some notion that right now this question is rather diminished. There is a popular survey that's been cited at least 3 or 4 times that I've seen in the past 15, 20 years, that only something like 16 to 18% of professional philosophers favor some form of theism versus atheism and agnosticism. Whereas that survey, as many have pointed out, but it hasn't been picked up, was really skewed. I was never asked as a professional philosopher what my view was. They didn't go to the faculty of even universities like the University of Notre Dame or Georgetown University, which are Roman Catholic, but we'd have to say nominally in some parts. I mean, there are atheists in each of these departments. It's not like unlike, say, Wheaton College, where you sign a faith that, so perhaps Calvin, Wheaton, those philosophers, they're all PhDs, though. And that survey does not represent the number of persons that receive doctorates in philosophy and higher education and what their dispositions are. So anyway, there are a significant number of both theists and naturalists. Probably naturalism is the default position still. But why is it alluring?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's probably an assumption that the burden of proof would be on someone who believed in, say, a creator and a redeemer who's omnipresent and supremely good, and the like. That, or being a religious Jew, being a religious Muslim, meaning you're praying 5 times a day. You're going to make a trip to Mecca if it is physically and financially feasible for you. If you're a Hindu, you have certain practices. I know several practices. You wind up doing actually believing in a Baha'i, a Sikh, any number of these religions, which make up the majority of the human population.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for somebody who's just content with what's my job, whom am I married to, how can I get a professional advancement, where do I want a vacation, what's my level of prestige right now.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of worldly reasons, as we know, and the medievals knew this too, of why a person would preoccupy themselves with immediate worldly goods. How can my family eat tonight? What do I do? I've just been diagnosed with arthritis. How do I handle?
Sorry.
So it's the immediate thing and the sense of the burden of proof. But I think the more that one thinks about the nature of the finitude of life, the more the bigger questions arise. Sadly, it's in times of crisis, but also I've seen it a number of times in moments of joy. Let's say when 2 people marry and they think about having a child, suddenly they think, well, what would the big picture have to do with our raising a child? Sometimes those occasions conjure up the real reason why many of us got into philosophy, which was the love of wonder.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you've kind of touched on the next question quite a bit already in terms of the nature of imagination, beauty, and how it ties into the gospel or revealed theology, and how these two connect. Yeah, and how naturalism sort of pales in comparison, but I want to nerd out. Go ahead.
I can speak to that in 2 ways. One is imagination, as when you picture that which you don't immediately see, can enhance one's experience religiously, whether it's of the Eucharist, whether it's of an icon, the use of a crucifix. I often, when I pray, I use a cedar in the sign of a cross, actually made in Bethlehem by practicing Palestinian Christians. And by imagining and picturing this greater world, for myself, as you are an Anglican, and I believe in the real presence of during the Eucharist, not transubstantiation as Roman Catholics, but I believe in a real sense this is the presence of Christ. And I came across an amusing line. I hope I'm permitted to use this line here. I'm quoting somebody else, but Flannery O'Connor, famous, very devout Roman Catholic novelist, and she said, if the Mass or the Eucharist or the Lord's Communion, if it's just a symbol, it can go to hell. Now that's a little stronger than I would put more rudely, but it does capture for me. Tolkien was very devoted to the Eucharist. He advised his son, Christopher, never lose sight of the drama of recreating the ultimate sacrifice of Christ's oblation and the celebration of him being risen as the key to his life as an adult. And so when Tolkien uses his imagination to create Lord of the Rings, you can see some real Christian truths through that work of creative imagination. Litmos, this elvish bread, gives them strength. Well, that's
Yeah.
maybe not unlike the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Following Gandalf, you learn a lot about practical wisdom and his own apparent death as Gandalf the Grey and his rising as Gandalf the White also gives you an imaginative, entertaining, but arresting image of what in another world it might be like to see the Christ in another figure.
Yes. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I like this interview, especially
Yeah.
when the person asking him, he goes, yes, yes. It reminds me, I was once interviewed for 2 hours by an atheist. And at the very end, he said, I am still an atheist. I said, yes, I know. He said, but in case I'm wrong, would you please pray for me? I agreed I would.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
I like these interviews.
No, it's good. It's good.
It's better than saying, now, Charles, you contradict yourself in these 3 places. Would you come
No, I think I think that's helpful. The imagination, you're connecting the dots between imagination as a natural phenomena, a natural kind of place. I mean, you're using imagination in kind of I think you define it in your book, Image in Mind, as a kind of first-person phenomenological encounter that it's rooted in, and it's in that encounter that there's something about the datum there that is suggestive of something that is contrary to certainly physicalism that we've described, physicalisms, as well as naturalism more generally, where there's some sort of closed or universe that excludes sort of outside causes or agents or something of the kind that could not only experience the world, but have a kind of imaginative encounter with the world. There's something about the nature of that itself that is at one level in your books is commonsensical. It's normal. It's a part of the normal processes of science and intellectual history. I mean, it's something that is at one level. At one level, it's mundane, but at another level, it's. I mean, and if you fixate on the mundane, it can be something that we certainly take for granted. Which, in a roundabout way, in your book, in Imagine in Mind, I think that's part of the point you're making. You and Jill are making. There's something there that has been taken for granted that is not explicable, and certainly explicable in naturalistic ways, that is even otherworldly. And it's at that point that there's a connection with revealed theology. You might call it revealed theology, gospel or something of the sort, that connects us with God. In the CT article, It's a Theological World After All. I touch on some of the discussions around consciousnesses. This is a real opportunity for theologians to speak and to speak up. Amidst all of the discouraging and depressing aspects of academia right now, which there's a lot we could point to. I mean, we can talk about that. I think there's lots of stats that suggest there's something depressing and discouraging about academia today. There's a lot of private schools. I don't think I can overstate this. There's a lot of private schools, even respectable ones, that are closing. And that's unfortunate. Now, especially in the realm of theology, theology has had some difficulty in America. There are lots of reasons for that. There's legal precedents for it. There's historical precedent for it. There's a social precedent with the God is Dead movement that certainly had some shaping effect on kind of the encounters of people had in of theology and the church and the like. But then I do try to end on a positive note, and I think it's a good one. Francis Schaeffer, he says this. I think there's something like he was saying more than, maybe he realized he was saying. But, he says about 6 years after The God is Dead publication in Times Magazine, he says, God is there and he is not silent. I mean, he was picking at the God is Dead movement. And and there's something about the nature of theology itself that is a practice. It's even a participation. So when we're speaking about these things, we're imagining these things, and from that place of imagination, we're creating, as it were, something. This is why science. I mean, at the end of the day, and all the sciences are products of philosophy. But that's taken for granted oftentimes. I mean, we wouldn't have the sciences of the day without philosophy. Philosophy was the generator of these differing disciplinary silos. But there's something about the nature of imagination that's participation in the divine, I think, that you kind of touch on in different ways, or you kind of talk. Sometimes you talk directly about it, but sometimes you're talking around this issue in a lot of different works, and you're pointing the reader or trying to give them an imaginative kind of portrait to help them find their way back. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I'm an admirer of Francis Schaeffer. In fact, I've spoken at L'Abri, this community he has founded, on several occasions. But what I might do, trying to wrap things up a little bit.
Yeah.
That in the sciences, we have these devices of seeing things that are either really small or really large and distant, namely the microscope and the telescope. So these developed over the ages, but prior to both, and they never would have been invented without imagination. There's the use of imagination in terms of our moral development. Iris Murdoch, she claimed that many of us take a long time before we actually realize that other people are as real as we are. We don't really get that. And Lynn Baker, a Christian philosopher, said, it was a real difference between believing all humans die and realizing I myself will die one day. And she did as a believer, but she did. And what Jill and I do is we think about the Bible or liturgy or life can be something that you see into, but something that you can also see through. And so one thing to wrap it up, thinking of readers now, somebody reading the Bible, and they can read God in the Bible as a character, just as you can read Zeus in the Iliad and the Odyssey. But for a believer, you can, through reading, come to experience God through the Bible, not instead of the Bible. And that way, they might be more like a microscope or a telescope. I would think of the Bible more as a doorway that you can enter through, or a window you can see through, maybe even a house that you dwell in. Think about all the numbers of images that have been used to capture this. But it's a way of seeing one thing through another. And that takes imagination. And indeed, that has a role in both natural theology, but especially in revealed theology, as someone comes to experience the Bible as a living word, not something dead and just on the paper. It will be that for the atheist. It might be interesting to him, her, for historical reasons, social reasons, and so on. But it's for when you enter into it as a believer, you try to see something through it.
Yes. Yeah.
And
No,
that's where imagination becomes the great vehicle.
yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. I really appreciate you, Charles. Thank you. You've
You're the
obviously, as
best.
you know, you've been a real influence and important kind of forming a thinker in my life, and so I really appreciate your time. I want to ask one really fun question, easy question, fun, easy. Um, your quick takes: best work, best film, best music.
Okay, best
Best
okay.
best work of art, best
Wow.
film, best piece of music.
Wow. You're gonna have to let me think for a second more.
You didn't expect this one. I didn't prepare you for this one. No. This is
Okay. Best work of art. I benefit of readers. You can find it online as this portrait of Lucretia that I was describing earlier by Rembrandt. There are several. One is in the National Gallery. That's quite different. But I urge you to do a Google Rembrandt portrait of Lucretia, MIA, Minneapolis Institute of Art. Just extraordinary, deeply, deeply Christian. Now, I guess I'll have to just answer favorite because I don't know whether I can name a best film, but I love Casablanca. I've watched it 100 times. And what I love about it is actually that it was done so beautifully in the sense that they didn't know how they were going to end it when they started it.
Yeah.
And there's a great authenticity there. C.S. Lewis said, when you read Hamlet or you see it performed, you should always be surprised why he hesitated. And that film also gives me that feeling. Is the woman going to wind up with Humphrey Bogart or to go with her husband? And I love that. There's a quick joke that I tell my class. You can change the ethnicity. An Irishman and an Englishman, they're seeing a Western. The Englishman said, I bet you a pint that cowboy will fall off his horse. And the Irishman said, you're on. And the cowboy falls off. And they go to a pub later. And the Englishman said, I have to admit, I saw the film yesterday. And so I knew he was going to fall off. And the Irishman said, yeah, I also saw it before, but I thought this time he's going to make it. And I would say, in a way, the Irishman saw the film for what it really is. It's just, the gospel should always slightly surprise you. If you're open to the surprises, I will bet you you will be surprised. So I would say to be open to surprise. Best music. Well, I'd have to just punt a bit and say I've always been a Beatles fan, and I kind of came of age when JFK was shot, and famously, one statesman at the UN said, his wife said, "We'll never laugh again," and he said, "No, we'll laugh again, but we'll never be as young again." But the Beatles actually showed us how to have fun and to be young again. And so over the years, given their sadness, interestingly enough, even the wicked things that John Lennon would say, he actually, just before he died, he described himself as a Zen Christian. So there is, and George Harrison, there's My Sweet Lord, Mother Mary Comes to Me. There are Christian elements that I love. But I can't help but end with my favorite poem, which is the Four Quartets, which once I memorized by T.S. Eliot. Highly recommend them to everybody. You'll never get to the bottom of them.
Yes. Oh, that's very good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Yeah, again, this is It's a Theological World After All with Charles Taliaferro. Theology isn't just a dusty textbook. It's a place where we meet, where we have conversations, and we imagine together. We enter into wonder and reason. And look forward to us having another discussion in the future. Next time, we'll be side by side in Croatia. We'll be in a place next to the water, imagining the beauties of God's creation in Croatia. One of my favorite places to be, actually, in Europe is Croatia. So look forward to that. Thanks again, Charles. Really appreciate you, as you know. Thank you.
All right.